Welcome to Season 11, Episode 19 of the Ubuntu Podcast. It's Tuesday, the 17th of July, and we're going to discuss what's been happening in the news and the community. I'm Mark, and joining me this week is Alan.
Hello, hello.
And Martin is off gallivanting the world this week. So instead we have Ryan, also known as Das Geek from the Destination Linux podcast. Hello, Ryan.
How you doing, everyone?
Awesome. Thanks for stepping in while Martin is out slacking in Montreal, I think he is this week.
Ooh.
Yeah, travels the world.
Lovely. Well, Alan, what have you been up to since last we spoke? Oh, it's been a while, hasn't it?
It has. It's been very hot. And while it was hot, one of the disks in my NAS failed. I think probably because of the heat.
Yes, I've been worried about that.
I wasn't particularly worried, but I chose the wrong day to start copying a load of files off my laptop onto the NAS over the network. And I think I chose the hottest day of the year and it overheated, I think, because I just happened to look at the admin interface and one of the disks failed.
Yes.
And I think it emailed me as well and told me one of the disks has failed. So I just went downstairs and pulled the disk out, and I happened to have another disk of the same capacity, slammed it in, and that was it. I just pressed a button in the user interface. It said something like, "There's another disk arrived that looks similar to the old one that left. Do you want me to use it as a replacement?" And I said yes, and it went, okay. That was it. It sat there rebuilding the RAID stuff, and I had no data loss, and everything was fine.
My favorite part of that story is the fact that you actually had a spare disk just sitting around. I mean, you can't get any geekier and awesome than that, right?
Well, yeah, true. I mean, the disks that are in that NAS are a mishmash. I think I posted a screenshot, and there's like 1 4 terabyte, two 2 terabytes, and a 1 terabyte. It's just like I threw anything I happen to have lying around, and the spare disk just happened to be in another server. But yeah, I do have far too much old computer looking at the shelf next to me, which never features on any video that I'm ever in because it's a giant mess, much like many other geeks. But yeah, I think that's the last spare disk I have, but I'm happy to say. So Netgear Ready NAS gets a thumbs up from me.
Oh, good, because that's what I've got as well.
There you go. Nice. Good choice.
Awesome. Ryan, what have you been up to?
Well, I don't have anything quite that exciting, but I have been playing with a new device that kind of relates to something we'll be talking about later with the Humble Bundle, but I got my hands on a Amazon Kindle Oasis. Now, this is a $250 e-reader.
Whoa.
Now, I would never pay $250 for this e-reader, but Amazon had these ridiculous deals, and so it was about $70. I don't know how much that is in your guys' fake money.
Much the same, actually.
Yeah,
but it's about $70, and so I couldn't resist because I wanted to see what the lure was for a $300 asking price on a device. So I got it, and I wondered, will it work natively within Linux as well? Will I be able to move books onto it and do that type of stuff? And sure enough, the second I plugged it in, I had Ubuntu running 18.04, and found it, mounted it as USB, was able to move books over to it without any issue at all. And it's quite a nice e-reader. If I had paid $300 for it, I'd have sent it back. But paying only $70, it's absolutely nice.
So is it basically like an Android tablet that happens to read books, or is it an e-paper display which is specifically for reading?
Yeah, it's just an e-reader display, but it does allow you to connect Bluetooth for Audible as well. So if you want to do kind of the listening, it has Audible connections into it. It has a 300 ppi screen, so very high resolution e-reader. It's waterproof, so I'm going to test that. No, I won't. But it's waterproof. It's got 8 gigabytes on it, and it's Wi-Fi. So it's a pretty nice reader. And
I had no idea they existed. I had no idea that such a high end. I thought they were all like sub $100, and they were all pretty cheap. And if you break it, you get another one, and just carry on reading. I had no idea there was a high end version.
Yeah, and the higher end ones come with the cover, and the cover also has another battery in it. So the big thing with this is it pretty much lasts for weeks and weeks and weeks without having to be charged. And so it's got a lot of neat features. Again, $300, I'd have a buyer's remorse. For $70, sure, I'll take it.
Wow.
Nice. Great. Well, let's get on with the show. And now it's time for some news. And first up in the news this week, Node Package Manager, the de facto tool for managing JavaScript libraries and development tools, has fallen victim to malware.
Oh, man. It's like every other week we're talking about some online packaging system that has some malware in it. What's in it this time?
So this was, there's a tool called ESLint, which is the tool for basically making sure that your JavaScript conforms to coding standards, whatever your coding standards happen to be. And I think it's a module of that, which is ESLint scope, was compromised. I think essentially someone had compromised the developer's account for that package, and then they'd published a nefarious version of that package, which then went on to whenever somebody who was also had a developer account ran it, it stole their authentication token and sent it off. So that they could compromise more accounts and presumably do the same things to other.
Oh, that's quite clever.
Other bits of software, yes.
What kind of kills me about this whole situation is the idea that now they're telling developers, hey, you should set up two-factor authentication. And you think of developers, at least in my book, as these brilliant people that would know this. To have two-factor authentication set up, it's kind of a give me, but that doesn't seem to be the case, as if that's the kind of fix, like Popey was saying, with all the different issues that have come up recently with this, is just enabling two-factor authentication here.
It is strange, but then I think there's this culture that we've now got where people are learning how to code, and the first thing they do when they've written some code is chuck it on GitHub. And then if it's a JavaScript module they've created, then the next step is you put it in NPM. And it doesn't mean you're a competent developer. It doesn't mean that you've followed best practices. It just means you wrote some code one day and decided to share it with the world. And that's the nature of open source. And the part of the problem is there's a lot of people out there who aren't following necessarily best practices.
And I suspect that the guides for doing this are basically, they say you run this command and then you type in a username and password and then it gives you an authentication token, and that's the only time you ever log in. So you're not really thinking about two-factor authentication on a day-to-day kind of basis.
Right. Now, is this something the hosting services, even, irregardless, even outside of NPM, could just enforce, maybe take the reins here, because we're hearing about this more and more, and say you have to have two-factor authentication if you want to upload files?
I think more sites are starting to do that, but it's really slow. It's not, it would make sense for more sites to enforce this, but you've got to balance that with wanting an easy onboarding process for people. And if you make it too hard for people, then they're just not going to want to do it. And I know from our perspective, if we made the Snap Store does have two-factor auth as an option, but we don't enforce it. And so we know that if we enforced it, that might be an extra stumbling block that might prevent someone, or might make them choose not to deliver their software via your store than, deliver it. And it could be as simple as that one thing. But I think over time, with all different sites adding these two-factor auths and other more complex authentication systems, I think it will become the norm. We just haven't got there yet, I think.
Makes sense.
Cool. Well, they have now revoked all of the tokens that were given before this compromise was discovered. So basically, everyone now has to log in again. And yeah, as Ryan says, they're recommending two-factor auth as a way of avoiding this being a problem in the future.
Ugh, crikey.
So Ryan, what's up next?
Well, Debian 9.5 gets released. So this is exciting news. Something a little happier than people getting hacked. Debian has released its 5th update to Debian 9 Stretch this week. So, they say this doesn't constitute a brand new version of Debian 9. So don't go throwing away your USB drives or reformatting them. They're not garbage bound yet. You could just simply update to it. But it is out there for people to play with and comes with some pretty neat things out there. Opie, what are some of the things you saw in there?
So this is sorry, I'll throw you off now. Is this like a point release? So it's just basically re-imaging the ISOs with newer stuff. It's not like a whole dist upgrade to a brand new release. It's just a interim release, right?
Yeah, it's not a major release, although there are some things I think are quite noteworthy in their release, specifically, having used Debian and having an NVIDIA 1080 card in the past, the older NVIDIA drivers always tended to be an issue. So in this case, one of the packages, for instance, that gets updated is they get some of the newer NVIDIA drivers up there by default without you having to go get them yourself.
Oh, was that harder on older releases? I haven't had an NVIDIA card on Debian for a while.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was harder. It was just more of, by default, pretty old. So anytime you talked about, like if I did a video or anything on Debian release, people who may not be as fluent in going and adding the latest driver themselves would be like, wow, I'm having all kinds of issues with this. So having the newer driver upstream, I think or upstream version of it, I think would be a good thing.
So this is actually in the Debian stable, which is usually kind of, I mean, I say usually, I haven't used Debian in a long time. It's sort of known for being a snapshot from quite a while ago of the kind of those sorts of packages. So this is sort of keeping some of the faster moving stuff up to date.
Yep. And there was also security patches for the Intel microcode containing patches relating to the Spectre CPU vulnerability. Sorry, Spectre V2 CPU vulnerability. So if you've burned some ISOs that are the old image and you install those, then potentially you're vulnerable. But if you
burned some ISOs, what are you from the past?
Well, this is Debian.
That's right.
Yeah. So so if your USB key is old, then maybe you want to DD this ISO over it, and then you've got the new secure CPU stuff.
Absolutely,
which is good.
And the latest Chromium and Firefox as well, which have built-in Spectre deterrence within them as well from executing that code. So that's a good thing that they're getting in the latest versions of those. And I would imagine some of those updates are probably congruent with the Spectre update that they're doing on the Intel microcode as well.
But if you're already on Debian 9, just update and you'll have all of this.
That's it.
Right. Cool.
So what's going on in the Snap Store, Alan?
Well, there's been a whole bunch of updates to the Snap Store, and I noticed that this got written about by It's Foss. The site now contains a verified checkmark, so you can see snaps that were created by a verified, in inverted commas, developer. So, for example, JetBrains has a little tick. It's like a green flower with a white tick inside it, so you know that the snaps that were built by JetBrains came directly from JetBrains and weren't interfered with along the way, or weren't built by some random community guy. They were. So this
specifically to say that this snap was built by the developer of this software, rather than anything else about the quality of the software or the developer or anything like that.
Published by. So it's published by that developer. So things like Skype, it came from Microsoft, and Spotify came from Spotify, and so on and so on. So and it's not just for the big companies. There are a few large open source projects that have been marked as verified as well. And it just gives you an additional thing to think about when you're looking to whether you're going to install a snap, as to whether you make the choice to install one snap or another snap. If it's got the verified checkmark, then you know that it was built by the people who created that software. So you can have more confidence in the stability, robustness, security updates, and all that kind of stuff that comes with that application.
I guess one of the negative things about always being in the terminal, because that's where I install most of my snaps, is I hadn't looked at the store in a long time. And my goodness, it is beautiful. Like the work they have done on this site, even the checkmark verified, I think that's a really, really nice feature. But the categorizations, the search capabilities, which frankly in some software stores just aren't so great, those things are not a problem within the Snap Store. It is just so well laid out. Beautiful.
So I think the design team will be pleased you've said that because they work very hard on that. And also the verified checkmark is coming to the terminal as well. So actually when you do snap info and then a verified snap like Skype, for example, you'll see a little green tick in the terminal to let you know that that's a verified snap. But you can also search the categories. I think they're called sections in the Snap Store, but you can search specific sections. So you can say only search for games, or only search for server software, or only search for finance or utilities or whatever. But yeah, you're right. It doesn't look as pretty as it does on the web.
Yeah, there was one recommendation, I think, in that article talking about wanting them to add a category for verified in there. And I thought that wasn't a terrible idea. Not necessarily needed, and maybe you don't want to deter people from thinking, oh, if it doesn't have verified, I'm not going to use it. So I'm not sure how I feel about that, but it was an interesting idea.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know whether actually that could just be a search parameter. Like, you can already search, and you could just maybe have a tick box that says, show me all the games, and then if you tick a box that says, and only show me the games that are verified,
Right.
maybe. But I mean, the problem is that there is a ton of software in there that's not from verified developers, but they are the upstream maintainer of that software. So
Sure.
I don't want people to think, anything that doesn't have a green tick mark is a terrible thing. Just like, if you look at the tick marks, the check marks on Twitter, not everyone with a blue check mark on Twitter is a fantastic individual, and not everyone without
Right.
a blue check mark is not a fantastic individual. It's not that kind of like black and white, but it's a good thing to help you decide what you might install.
Yeah. Another feature I like is if you are on Ubuntu 16.04 or later and you click the install button on the website, it actually gives you the option to open it in the GNOME software app.
So well
Yeah.
done.
Install through that.
Yeah, that took a lot of work to get that working. There's a lot of moving parts to make that work, because it turns out it's not actually that easy to make a web page launch a graphical application on your desktop reliably. And if you're on Windows or on a Mac, that button doesn't work. It won't launch GNOME software on a Mac, or like, what's it going to do there? So you have to cater for what happens on those other platforms. But yeah, it's really good. It's nice to see other people noticing those changes, because we didn't make a big song and dance about the store, but other people picked up on it, which is nice.
Yep.
Yeah. And finally, this week in the news, there is a Linux Geek Humble Book Bundle.
I love it.
Yeah, this is over at humblebundle.com as usual. You can pay up to $30 and get 18 DRM-free Linux and open source books. Right, it sounds like you've got a favourite among them already.
Well, not a favorite among them. I wanted them all. Like this is so up my alley. I'm believe it or not, Martin will tell you that I don't read manuals, and he's right. But I do read lots of books, and this
I
was.
think so, with a 250 quid Kindle.
I better, right? I better get my money's worth out of
make
it.
the most of it. Yeah.
So when I was talking earlier about moving books over, this was the bundle that I had purchased down here. I think I got the $15 version, which came with a bunch of the books that I was interested in. It has some programming in Python and stuff like that, but I was more interested in the How Linux Works book, which by itself is a $33 book on Amazon. That's for the digital version. So this is $500 worth of books that you can pick up for $15, or if you pay $30, you get an extra book in there, the Linux programming interface. But what a fantastic deal. When Humble Bundle comes out with stuff like this, I just have to jump on it.
My only problem with these is there's such a diversity of books in there. It's like GIMP, Inkscape, Blender, Perl, Python, BSD, pfSense, Arduino. It's like everything. Like, you could jumpstart 0 to hero and learn a whole ton of stuff, right?
Yeah.
But equally, they could also be a bunch of PDFs sat on your hard drive doing nothing, which is what would happen if I bought them.
Well, it's more about setting a status symbol as well. So if somebody borrows your Kindle, they'll look at it and look at all these books and go, "Wow, he is smart."
Yeah. You've got to try and, like, before you hand it to someone, you've got to quickly open all of those books, so it pushes them up to the front and makes your recommendations, not all the trashy novels that you actually read when you're on holiday.
Exactly. You know it.
Yeah. The deal runs out on the 30th of July, I think, which there's plenty of time for people to pick that up.
Great. And that's all of the news this week. And now it's time for some community news and event. First up in the community news this week, Ubuntu 17.10 Artful Aardvark is dead.
Harsh.
Upgrade to 18.04 now.
Really? That came around really fast.
Yeah.
I mean, 9 months is the same duration as every one of those interim releases, but it always feels like when we have LTSs that last for 2 years, those 9-month interim releases, they live and die so quickly.
Yeah. I think it's also the fact that sort of, the fact they die during the LTS cycle as well now. It kind of it all seems very fast. But then I never install them anyway, so it doesn't affect me.
So this is the one that Art for Love Arc is the one where we switched from Unity to GNOME as the default, and that was the one where we had Wayland by default as well, before switching back to X by default in 1804. So
Wayland was by default, but done correctly, because it detected if you had, say, an NVIDIA card, and it would automatically put you in the X session, which was just brilliant. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, when it worked, it was hilarious. when I think Didier Roche was working on that, and I remember him having interesting fun when he got the logic of that wrong, and he couldn't log into any session at all, which or would crash the GDM completely, or mess it up in such a way that he couldn't get into his own system, which was hilarious debugging. Yes. But that's all past us now.
Yes, I discovered the other day that if I'm encoding a video on my Steam box, I can't then log in and run Steam in a separate session because my video card's busy. That was a fun experiment of just things not happening when I press buttons.
Wow.
Yeah, because it starts a separate X session and then it says that it doesn't have the hardware acceleration available because I guess it's busy using it for encoding. Fun discoveries. What's next, Alan?
Next up, the Free Culture Showcase is open for 1810. So for those who don't know, and it is a bizarrely named thing, the Free Culture Showcase, the history of this is that there used to be a folder on the desktop on Ubuntu called Example Content, and it had a spreadsheet, a document, a presentation, an audio file, a video file, and a couple of images. And the idea was that these were sample files that you could open with it would have been OpenOffice back then, but LibreOffice, the GIMP, and test out audio files and just like stuff to open, so you don't just get a blank desktop. And many years ago, it was suggested that we replace those with community maintained example content, and it was called the Free Culture Showcase. And for many years now, we've put out calls for people to submit photos or video or audio clips that we could put in there, and that gets baked into the image. So anyone who installs that release of Ubuntu gets this example content baked into the ISO, so that they can look at nice pictures and have decent photos in their wallpaper, and not just a random spreadsheet or presentation that isn't really particularly meaningful. And Nathan Haynes has announced the Free Culture Showcase is open for 1810, which starts now and concludes on August 13th. So if you're a photographer, artist, and want to submit an item of digital content to the Free Culture Showcase with the possibility it will be on the ISO, then we'll have a link to how you do that in the show notes.
If only I had some talent to contribute to that.
That is my problem as well. Yes, I am sadly lacking any artistic talent. So, yeah.
Well,
Ryan, what's next?
Well, minimal Ubuntu cloud images have now become available out there. So this is not to be confused with other minimal ones, I think, that are out there. But this is really meant for the cloud. And as I understand it, it's 50% the size of the standard Ubuntu server image and 40% faster in the boot. So somebody sat there with a timer and checked that and figured it out. But that is pretty amazing that they've got it down that small. So I would imagine this is cloud-based services and something you guys may know way more about than me.
Yeah, we spoke to David Britton about this a bit in episode 8 when we interviewed him. But I think the idea of this is if you're using a tool like Kubernetes, which does like automatic orchestration of cloud images, like deploying virtual machines and spinning up a service on them, and then it like monitors them and throws them away after whatever criteria you set and spins up new ones again, then this is a really good base for that, because it's got just the operating system you need and nothing else, nothing human interactive, because a human's not going to interact with it. It just has the base of the OS, and then you stick your deb or your snap or your Docker image on it and then throw it away afterwards. Nice. So it's really good for deployments like that. And if you do need to debug them, you can SSH in and unminimize it, and it'll install all the normal tools.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty funky, that there's a way to kind of unfreezify it and make it turn into a normal image so that you could actually use it to debug whatever's wrong with it. That was pretty clever. Yeah, not something I'm likely to use at home, I don't think, but good for those giant cloud deployments where they spin up hundreds of machines and then shut them down again like seconds later. Really cool.
And finally, we have an event. It is, of course, OggCamp.
Yes. When's that happening? 18th, 19th of August in Sheffield.
Yes, so about 1 month from now.
Yeah, not long now.
I just booked my hotel.
Yes, so did we. I'm sharing with Martin. We're going to take the Martin battle bus up to Sheffield.
The battle bus?
Yeah. It's a relatively large car. Battle bus.
It has lots of sockets and USB ports. And
I bet it does. I love it.
Built-in Wi-Fi and
I forgot about the built-in
and probably
Wi-Fi.
extra hard drives in the glove compartment. In case your NAS fails.
Yes. Yes, so some new announcements. There is information about the scheduled track on the website now. So you can see we have a full lineup following the call for papers of speakers on a huge variety of topics, something for everyone, I think, in there. There are social events happening on the Friday, Saturday and Sunday night, and there will be more details on the website about those. And it will be a great help to us if there's a quick social survey which John's put together, which is just a quick poll to say if you think you're likely to attend the Friday, Saturday and Sunday nights, just so we have a rough idea of numbers, so we can tell the venues, if we're going to swamp them or if maybe it's going to be a bit quieter than we expected. Sponsors, it's sponsored by Entroware, the OggCamp community, Ubuntu, supported by Canonical, and OpenSUSE. So thank you to all of those. Especially to Entroware, our platinum sponsor. And finally, if you have a younger person coming along who might want to join the Coder Dojo, there is an option on the tickets page on the website for a younger person ticket. And if you could sign them up for one of those, that just helps us estimate numbers, just so that we can make sure we put it in the right sized room and so on.
That's such a brilliant idea to get the kids in young. My son's 5 years old, and we have him on Raspbian desktop because I'm starting him with Linux, right? But
Wow.
I'm terribly jealous of this event. When I looked at the YouTube videos of kind of the background with it, and I saw all kinds of hardware there, from 3D printers to Raspberry Pis and all the hacking going on. What an awesome event this looks like.
Yeah, this is really good. We've been wanting to do something like this for several years. There's been the idea of Sprog Camp bandied about, but we've never quite been able to put it together. But this year we've got Ben Nuttall from the Raspberry Pi Foundation, and we've got a funding grant from Everyone, which is letting us put this on, which is really good.
Love it.
And I should say a big thank you for John, the nice guy Spriggs, who is actually doing all the work. And that's all the community news and events.
Are you an alternative freedom hater? Thought so. We know you lot love Overcast. Cleanse your soul by giving each show a freedom-loving thumbs up in the app.
And that's all for episode 19. Oh,
awesome.
It's a hot one in here, I've got to say.
It is. It is hot here too. Thank you for coming on and replacing Martin. I don't think we need him back now, really.
I love it. I love it.
Martin, you're fired. Will you be around next week?
Absolutely. I'll be here for you.
Excellent. Brilliant. Well, come back again next week if you want to hear more Ryan. We'll be having a bit of a chat with him about his Linux journey. And I think we're going to bring you some command line love.
And feedback.
And some feedback, of course.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.